Yeah, again.
Hello. Okay, get straight back into it, shall we? Um,
Yeah, so the giving birth is pretty it's a pretty big thing.
I've heard it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's a shame when my when my granddad. I shouldn't laugh about this. My granddad used to live in France, and he had a triple heart bypass, and they gave him red wine to help him deal with that. I'm like, if that was actually part of the childbirth care, then I'd feel slightly more comfortable with it. But we're not supposed to
Yeah.
have alcohol either with binds. Anyway, yeah, the
Yeah.
childbirth element. That is, I mean, we laugh about it, but it is a genuine concern, and obviously, there's always a safety risk with women going through childbirth and carrying a child. So it is another huge aspect to consider. What do you think would, and this is a tricky question potentially, but is there anything, and if so, what would reassure you with that side of things?
Yeah, I've thought about this. Like, okay, how am I actually going to mentally do this? Obviously, there's a physical element, but actually, like, get myself okay with this. And I think, I mean, I've always liked the idea of having a natural birth, but like you say, you don't know what's going to happen, and you can
Mm,
be rushed into hospital, and you have to have a C-section, and then all of a sudden you're put in an IV, and they're giving you antibiotics, and all of that is like kind of out of your control, which kind of feels a little bit scary.
yeah.
I think, yeah, I recently had two friends. One of them, both of them very close friends. One of them had a natural birth, and the other one wanted a natural birth at home. So both did home births, but she ran into complications and she had to go into hospital. So it's like, yeah, it's, I think it's preparing for any possibility, like
Mm.
intention, like hanging off a tree and doing it at home. But then, okay, to make sure that my body is going to be ready for if I need to go into hospital, and yeah,
Yeah.
be put in that position, I think. And ideally, talking to, sorry, my dog's snoring. Ideally, talking to people. I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I'd actually want to go to like a private hospital and have a discussion with them and say, if I do need to come in, can you please not give me all the drugs under the sun? And
Yeah.
actually, because that's kind of the seriousness of it, because you could potentially be set back really badly.
Yeah, which is the last thing you need if you've just given birth to a new human.
Yeah, imagine.
Um, is that not possible with the public health system? I mean, I'm talking for the UK, but is that a general thing that you can't sort of make a request like that?
I hear very mixed things. I think it depends what hospital you go to. Some hospitals have really bad reputations, some have amazing reputations. So I think it's
Mm,
again like doing that research and seeing, like, because I hear such mixed stories with the NHS, people having awful, awful experiences, but then some people saying, oh, my birth was amazing.
mm.
Yeah, I think just making sure you go to a good hospital, number one.
Such a postcode lottery, isn't it? And for your healthcare, that the most important thing.
Mm,
That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I think the research element really comes into play, and that we can say that about benzodiazepines and medications in general. Is actually doing your own research and working with people that seem to have those credentials and that other people have spoken highly of, which isn't always easy to ascertain in terms of what reviews are legitimate, etc. Um,
and actually saying, like, it'd be amazing if you could go in, like before your birth, for example, and say, I have bind, because bind is
yeah,
something that's, well, I suppose quite recent now. We have this bind term, but it's not yet widely known. And it would be
mm,
amazing if you could go in with a piece of paper and say, this is what I've got. And so actually that's treated in all seriousness when someone's giving birth.
yeah, absolutely. Because even if you go in and you say, well, I have a neurological injury from a medication, the looks that you get back, from the medical professionals are usually just like, so what
Yeah.
what do you want us to do with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what can you say? Because we haven't been given the evidence or the understanding. I still don't. We have some generalized understanding of GABA receptors, etc., etc. but
Yes.
it's so abstract, and it's so
I
not
know.
visible on these tests, etc. So then you don't have this clear sharing of information to sort of work from that and work out what to do with that going forward. So it is another leap of faith, which after everything that you've gone through with this recovery is kind of such a huge thing to then go through again and put yourself in a position of a complete unknown, really. It does feel like, Russian roulette to a large degree.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Is there a kind of ideal moment where you feel like, once I'm at this level of health / this level of circumstance in my life, that's kind of the sweet spot for you? Or are you, I mean, that could be true as well, but are you also, I guess, willing to take that leap of faith, even if it's not the perfect circumstance, if you kind of worked out your gauge on that?
Well, it's also like, what can I actually make happen? I think I'm going to be off the benzodiazepine this year. October is looking like that's going to be the date, realistically. So I'm 38 in November. And then, I'm kind of coming up to the late 30s now. And, they all say that your fertility drops off at 37 than it does at 40. And, there's all these like stair step things. So ideally, really, for me, I mean, I like to dream. I'm a bit of a dreamer. Next year, if I was to meet a guy, and because now when I meet people, I'm quite forthcoming and say, hey, well, if I'm getting to get together with someone, it's to start a family. Like, that's my intention, sort of thing. Not like tomorrow, but obviously at some stage soon. So ideally, I'd love to meet somebody next year, having been off the benzo for 6 or so months, see how I'm feeling, and go from there. And hopefully, like, without pressure. I mean, it's so awful to feel like there's this pressured time now. I've got this like window to work. How I've got to make all these things happen really quickly. So, and that's also if I feel like well enough when I get off the benzo.
Yeah, and that's it. There are so many layers to this. I just, it's a lot. It's a lot to navigate, as we've been saying, and I think it's kind of having that sense of understanding of what we each want, and then sort of being at peace with, like you say, working towards a timeline, but also having that sense of, this is the timeline that I want, but we just kind of have to see, because no one can force these things, and it's tricky. How old am I?
Yeah.
I just turned 36 actually, a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're both similar around.
Yeah, sorry, the connection went a bit funny. So we're both very, very similar timelines, and it's strange because I don't know if you found this with your recovery, but I sort of feel like half of me feels 10 years older, just because of how what is even the word? Just the depth and breadth of this whole recovery. And then part of me still feels 28, which is when I came off the benzo, and the injury really, really hit at that point. And so, like we were saying before, when you've just been so tunnel visioned on surviving, being able to just do normal things like walk outside again, sleep more than 4 hours a night. It's quite
like normal plans.
Yeah, exactly. Even just to be able to walk out in mild sunshine, which thankfully now I can do, but that was a thing for years. But it's quite jarring to then sort of almost just wake up and be like, oh, I'm 34, 35, I'm 36. And now dealing with this thing that in your mind, doesn't feel like a natural timeline, because your timeline's being skewed by something else coming in a significant way. And so you're sort of having to adapt and go, sort of not panic stations, but just, it's just kind of like, I wasn't ready for this, but it's at my door, and I just need to think about how I want to deal with it if I want to keep that door open.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is why we're having this conversation, because it's taking those steps. And I think part of me has been, as I say, reluctant to sorry, my contact lens is being all fuzzy, blurry. I think a part of me is being reluctant to kind of face this head on because it is such a big thing. And because I don't particularly, as I say, naturally feel ready right now, but I feel like if I don't get ahead of it, then I might regret that further down the line.
Exactly. And I think that's where the egg freezing thing comes in. I had a chat with somebody recently about embryo freezing, and she was just telling me how it's actually quite a recent thing, this egg freezing. It wasn't long ago, actually, they just couldn't make it work. They couldn't and it's only recently they've discovered this egg freezing and embryo freezing as well, which is where you get somebody else's donor sperm and you put it in the egg and it creates the embryo and you freeze the embryo. So saying how there's all these options and things like that, but it's so costly. For me, it's like I'm still trying to get myself kind of on an even keel really with finances, and it's a lot of money and you don't actually know if it's going to be successible.
I know. I think when I first heard about that, like years and years ago, I was like, sorry, what? You're paying how much? And you don't know if it's going to work. It is. It's and then if it does work, then you've got the next financial consideration, which is raising the child in a healthy way, or potentially raising two. Because I think so with my route, I'm going to have to go IVF, I would imagine, because not being straight and all that. There's that added extra consideration. So a friend of mine's brother and his wife went through IVF and they ended up having twins. Excuse me.
Wow.
So even like you were saying, you sort of have to factor in all these different considerations, all these different outcomes, because they are the biggest stake outcomes that you could probably have in life. And so for me, it's you've got the health stuff. You've got the gauging what your fertility status is, etc. But then even if that's tick, 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 then it comes down to circumstances, career, finances, logistics. It's just there's so much to consider. As I say, I'm not looking to do this tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But it is kind of trying to get your ducks in a row after all of this has happened. And there's a new sense of pressure that I feel, as you were sort of saying as well.
The pressure and the years that kind of go by and you're like, oh, another year.
Yeah. I feel like it's blink and it's, Easter again or Christmas again or birthdays again. And it's very surreal.
There's like a lot of noise around fertility as well. And I suppose most of my friends really wanted to have babies around 35, 37. Like that is the kind of age, 38. And then, women seem to be kind of completely written off when they come to the age of 40 or over. It's like, oh no, she's probably poor thing. That's probably going to happen for her. Whereas actually, I've been to so many women's circles and lots of healing groups of women there, and having so many discussions with women that have had children at 40, above 40. And it's like, there's also that element I try to put into my brain so I don't feel so panicked and so sort of hopeless. Is actually, I think that there can be a lot of negativity as well, I think, in our society about fertility and
and also somewhat inwardly as well, because I think that's part of the trauma healing is when you've been so impacted by something and the kind of ground has just come away beneath you. It can be hard to go from that where you're in kind of defensive vulnerability mode to let's look at all the positives, and because you're kind of somewhat then calibrated to be scared of worst case scenario because you've just gone through it with this other thing that you've experienced. So that was actually going to be one of my questions to you is what is a reassurance that you've heard of or seen or could have told yourself? And I think that hearing that from you also is very reassuring for me. And I even today I saw something on Instagram from somebody that posted about having a child in their early 40s and just how actually it was the perfect time for them, and they feel really at peace and really calm and really fulfilled, I think they said. And I think that's amazing.
I also think that like the internet, social media, Instagram, it's really changed how like information gets passed around. And so we're just seeing all this information the whole time, which actually can create maybe these, I don't know, misleading perspectives. Like if you think about years ago when our parents were our age and having children, no one was posting on Instagram or Facebook saying like, oh my, about their fertility. And I speak to a lot of women, like older women now in their 70s, where I'm saying, oh, I had a baby at 42. Oh, I had a baby at 45. And it just wasn't discussed back then, I guess. It wasn't like a big thing.
Yeah, and that ironically is a testament to how far the medical industry has come in so many ways, and also our general well-being and health. And I think that has given us, and maybe that was plausible generations before to some degree, but there is that lifting of the social stigma from previous generations in terms of the age that you can do this. And I think I'm very grateful for that. And I think it is really wise that despite the challenges that people in our position face with this, and women in other positions face with this, actually to really, really try and calibrate your mind to focus in on the positives and the possibilities and what's been done before, I think is really powerful. I do think that psychological element can really make a significant difference in just feeling relaxed about it.
Because I think it can be really psychological. And also it's like, we're both in this place. There's nothing we can do about it. So I try and think, well, what's going to serve me here? Okay, there are facts and science that I've all heard about, and that just freaks me out and puts me into panic mode. So why don't I opt for the other also completely possible option that women actually do have children later on in life, and they're both are completely viable. And I find that, it's not going to serve my nervous system to be in that state of panic and fear, is it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it just makes me think more seriously about, okay, like you say, you're in this position, acceptance is a big part of that. But then where do you want to be? You know, what, and it sounds really cheesy, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? But there is an element of that, of like, what do you want? Because if you don't choose it, you're going to get given something, whether you want it or not. And I think that's true of kind of all aspects of life. And so for me, it's kind of, it's really brought the focus in on wanting to create and wanting to spend time creating a life that is really healthy. It makes me feel happy, and I wake up and I feel really excited to do the thing that I'm about to do that day, and to spend time with those people and go to bed feeling really fulfilled. And I think that is kind of this long-term plan for at least having the option of starting a family and being ready to do so. I think, just getting the ducks in a row before the duckling arrives, I think is it.
Yeah, like you were saying, because your journey's been so long, like it's been such a long time for you, and there's such a huge portion of your life where, like you were saying, you still feel like you're 28, 29, and it's almost like, it's all sort of just gone into this like, I don't know, I don't want to call it like a hole, but it can feel like that. And I know what you mean. I've only had half of that time, and I do understand. It just feels like this kind of vacuum. It's like, where did that go? And I think that a lot of processes go through us, and it's like, I still feel like I want to do a lot with my creativity. I want to do, like you were saying, write your music. You want to, and I think when you come back from the dead, quite literally, you have this new perspective of life. And it's like, I actually want to, I want to write the album. I want to do all these things, but I also want to start a family. And it's like, like you say, like, okay, how am I going to create this vision? How am I going to make this happen, sort of thing?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And having enough flexibility as well to kind of not then feel like you're off course or you're off your timeline, because that can obviously be a stressor as well if you feel like you are behind or it's not quite going the way you want. So I think it's kind of having this framework and these milestones and prioritizing what's really important to you, but then allowing life to just kind of be life and do its thing, and offer up all kinds of pathways as to how those things could come to fruition. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's this weird climbing out of this vacuum and being like, wow, look at all the possibilities of life again. You don't want to feel like you have survived that and kind of had this rebirth yourself, only to then feel like you now can't experience it because now you've got to do this really serious thing and have these big responsibilities. So I think it's kind of figuring out the rough timeline that fits for each of us individually in terms of what ideally would you want to do before you have a family, but then also what do you need to do to make sure you still have the choice of having a family at some point?
Definitely. And actually, as you were just talking, like I've spoken to lots of women obviously harmed by benzodiazepines, but there's a lot of people that are put on antipsychotics, antidepressants. And it might not be that they experience like obviously this severe withdrawal state, but they do experience this kind of numbing of themselves. And they often explain it in a sense where I think there's almost like a spectrum of this harm. It's like you're either nervous system harm or you take the drug and actually you're just not yourself, and you almost wake up once you come off the medication. And I hear a lot of those stories where like people have been on these medications for 20 years, they come off it and they're like, wow, I've got this new lease of life. I feel like I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to be doing in that time.
Yeah.
It's just that how many people are actually going through this process, like on this whole spectrum of medication. It can kind of, it can go from severe to like, well, more subtle, I guess.
And it must be massive. And there must be a lot of people out there who don't realize that they're in this position where, like the interview that I did with Dr. Yusuf the other day, he was saying about when you're having side effects that affect the thing that allows you to judge whether you're having side effects or not, you don't always understand how it's impacting you. So there's probably an untold amount of women and men out there who don't realize that their partner or you as an individual aren't yourself, or potentially are pregnant and about to give birth, but don't realize how those drugs are affecting you. And so, I think that, again, that comes back to informed consent and why these conversations are important, and being able to talk about it and kind of spread that awareness and make sure that mother and child are as safe and as healthy as can be. What's for you? I mean, again, like, I don't know how much you would want to share or not, but what would you ideally like to sort of, for want of a better phrase, like get done and achieve and experience before maybe being in a position to settle down?
Well, I feel like I suddenly realized I'm in Spain. I am in a flat by myself on the top of a mountain, very beautiful mountain, be it by myself most of the time. But I've managed to create a studio here, a music studio, which is something that I've wanted to do and procrastinated about for like 37 years of my life. So I was like, Emma, you're on a mountain, you've got a beautiful view, you've made a music studio, like you're actually doing the thing that I always wanted to do. And I am devoting, I guess, this year really to all my creative passions and just doing my ideas. You know, those ideas that you're like, oh, I'll do that one day. And then the year goes, and I've got 3 projects that I'm actually almost finished, and they're ones that I've been procrastinating on for years and years and years. So I feel like that's going to give me hopefully that feeling that I've exercised that and opened this floodgate of men that will come towards me and with my pheromones be like, I'm ready.
I mean, it could well happen that way. You just don't know. I think something weird happens when you sort of dive into your creativity head first. I've always found that when I've really gone into the music, like suddenly I've met somebody and it's been this great relationship, or it's just been this weird like parallel pattern. And then when my bands have fallen apart, my relationships have kind of ended around the same time, which is really weird. So it may actually happen that way. You just don't know.
Just don't know. And sometimes I think, like, because I kind of know on a very deep level that I'm still on this medication, I wonder if because I already feel almost quite enlightened off of the quetiapine. Once I get off the benzo, I feel like I'm going to feel this sense of freedom, and well, I hope. And again, maybe this will attract more of the family. But you never know; it can happen. My friend from school, old best friend, don't really see much of her anymore, but she met a guy, and within 6 months they had a child, and now they have 3 children.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
I often get into my head, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to take ages to, be in a relationship, get to know somebody, want to create a family with someone. And
You
Yes, it's
just,
like remaining open. I think that's it, isn't it? Just keep
yeah.
remaining open.
I do think the older that we all get as well, the more life experience that we have to understand who we are, but also what we want in a relationship, and vice versa. So I think maybe just more efficient with it the older you get. Not always, but I think that does add something to it. And also I think when you know, you just know, and you move forward with that if it's the right situation. So yeah, I think just being open-minded and
Yeah,
seeing what can happen.
that's the important thing, isn't it? It's like not letting those negative beliefs, because I come in. Like I could easily be like, "There's no hope," but there is actually still hope.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And it's a weird balance of kind of processing those emotions, because I think it is a normal human reaction to have those fears and have those doubts and have that anger and have that frustration. And I think processing them in order to deal with them and kind of move on from them is part of the healing regime, if
Definitely.
you like. But it's kind of not letting it get to the point where it consumes you and overtakes the ability to see the positives and to focus on those positives as well. But yeah, just going back to what you were saying about creativity and passions as well, I just think that's the best way that we generally meet like-minded people as well. When you're just in living life, doing what brings you alive and what lights you up and what fulfills you. I think, it sounds really woo, but I do think that's where life and the universe and the world and whatever, whoever kind of responds to that and says, okay, like we see you lighting up, therefore
Yeah, I
these other things
completely.
start to open up.
Yeah. I was having this conversation yesterday with a friend, and she was saying how it's really good if you make these choices, like I've made this choice to come here and to devote my time, and okay, maybe I'm sometimes I wonder what the hell I'm doing. But I think it attracts as a frequency to that. Like you say, when you're doing
Mm,
when you're being your full self in that sense, like really kind of being the person that you're kind of meant to be,
yeah,
that I think there's a frequency to that. So I know what you mean.
I agree. I think you're living in a state of openness and possibility rather than fear and kind of locking away sides of yourself. And I think if you do that, which we all can do, and again, it's part of the experience of
Mm.
life, I suppose. But I think when you're in that state, it's harder to kind of then be open to making connections of any kind compared to when you're living more freely and kind of living in this space of possibility. There's something else I
And
was
when
going to
we're
say,
making
but I can't remember.
you're making this film Toxic, and I've got What's Up Doc, and that is a huge thing to do. I think
Mm.
creatively as well. It's a huge kind of thing to
Yeah,
begin, and
yeah. And
it's therapeutic in a sense as well.
absolutely. And I've always seen, for me, the film's always been that kind of like, this is how I personally draw the line under the situation, knowing that I can take my story, my experience, my understanding of it, and turn it into something that could actually help other people, but that's also cathartic and fun. I'm sure it'd be
Exactly.
stressful at times, but ultimately fun and fulfilling to make. But that's something else that, what's that, sorry?
Sorry, the fact that you went to Cannes.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Yeah, it's still very surreal. I'm like, did I actually just go there? And then I went back. I don't know if I told you I went back to France. I've just come back.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I went back as well. So yeah, and again, I mean, that speaks to what you were saying earlier, that you just don't know. If you had told me a few months ago that I'd be going to Cannes Film Festival, I just yeah, mind kind of blown. And that's the thing. I think when you do step into the things that excite you and you can't quite put your finger on it, but there's something there and you want to follow that through, things do. I've definitely noticed in my life, and I know other people have said this, that things do just seem to kind of open up. And I think it's the same with this situation
Yeah.
as well. I mean, ideally, I would love to get the film out before thinking about this side of things, just because the film, I think, is kind of like having a child in some ways. And maybe that's not fair to say because I've not made a feature film and I've not had a child. But I think the level of commitment that's needed, you know, I think that'd be very hard to balance. I'm sure people do it, but if you're going through this kind of healing journey as well, and also not just, I mean, something we haven't mentioned, but I think for me, one thing that is important is to really kind of deal with the trauma side of it too, because the more I've healed physically, the more I've it's then kind of cleared the clouds to see more of that emotional side of it. And we're all going to be works in progress for the rest of our lives, but I think I would like to feel like I've really processed that to a healthy enough level where I really do have that sense of kind of peace and readiness for something of this magnitude as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, following on from what I asked you about, or what you said about something reassuring for anyone listening to this that's in the same position, just something that the Alliance for Benzodiazepine Best Practices said, which is that many bind individuals, and I think we can speak to this, and we've seen this with other people, do see improvements in their general health, including reproductive health. So if you are on a benzodiazepine, or worried about this or worried about coming off it, the evidence is there to really show that we do heal, and that includes this system as well. And then, like Emma was saying, just seeing how many women in their 40s, 30s, 40s do have children, and it's right for them. I think they're just really positive notes to kind of leave on. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that at all?
That for anyone going through this and they're feeling hopeless, is that healing is possible, and the perspective that it gives you makes you dare more, I think. And that can in the end feel like a slight silver lining from the torture.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, and I think that's a really valid point to make, and a really important point to make. And again, I think I said this another conversation. You never want to romanticize the situation, but I do think that there are these silver linings that you can really, really amplify the positivity in. And I think for those of us that have been through this, and then having to rebuild your lives the other side of it, kind of independently as well, actually. I think, and as friends have said to me, they've sort of reassured me, you're going to be a great parent and a great mother, because not just because of the situation, but actually because you've gone through this, because you've had this understanding, that gives you an extra kind of layer of toolkit, I suppose, to kind of bring to the table with this situation as well. So it can be really easy to get caught up in it and feel really hard done by, and feel XYZ about the situation. Yeah,
exactly. Being that like anger and bitter, and like you were saying, you know, I think it's just to allow yourself to feel that, but yeah, think of what will serve you more, and there's always a positive somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not in then, but when you're healing,
and that's that. I think for anyone at any stage of this, just to be reminded of that is really important. I definitely valued those messages when I was really in the thick of it, as I think we all do. Just have to say as well, your dream of the music studio in the mountains is absolutely my dream too, and I'm trying to make that happen right now. So I'm hoping we'll both have this. It is weird how parallel our situations are.
I know. You can make it happen. It's amazing. I mean, I'm here right now. I'm looking over the mountains and I'm like, it's crazy. Wow. I've actually made this happen. I don't know whether I would have done that before benzos. Not to say that I would never actually, I wouldn't, if I could do it again, I'd choose not to go through it. But yeah.
Yeah, but it is, I mean, we've kind of mentioned this before, haven't we? That it gives you a sort of extra sense of, well, I survived this, I might as well go for what I really want to do, and gives you that extra fortitude to just go for it. And to anyone that's maybe listening to this, I'm sure I speak for you as well, and I say, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect with other women that are maybe in the same position, or if you have gone through this and you've had children, had a child, It'd be great to hear from you alongside any specialists that might be listening to this and that might be able to sort of contribute to the conversation and provide extra informed consent and understanding. That I think this knowledge sharing that we have amongst the community and people tethered to the community can be really empowering and actually, again, reinforce that sense of hope and everything else. So yeah, feel free to reach out in the comments or either of us directly. And yeah, we did say we may sort of do ongoing conversations around this as time goes on, see where we go with it.
More information, like if we have people coming forward and telling us, hey, like I went through this and I've had a child, or you know, whatever happens, we will share.
We will, and then we'll have a watch session with all of our children in 10 years' time. Emma, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely chatting with you as always. And yeah, just on a personal level, it really feels reassuring and full of hope, even though there are those challenges there, to sort of look them head on and go, but actually there's a net positive here and there are things to work towards. And I hope anyone listening to this in the same position feels that as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And I look forward to having another conversation around this again soon.
Lots of love.
Yeah, you too. Bye.